we will try to understand Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen, right? So our heading would be Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen. Surya Sen, Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen. Try to understand the context, why we are discussing Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen, why they are important for us. We have to understand the role of Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen in the context of development of 1920s and 1930s. They represented a kind of frustration, and they wanted to express themselves through a new approach, what we call a revolutionary approach. So the context of Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen is second wave of revolutionary extremism. Fine. So when we understand role of Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen, we have to understand the situation after suspension of non-cooperation movement, right? So what we have to understand, that the sudden suspension of the non-cooperation movement shattered the high hopes, right, raised earlier. I hope you are getting it. So both had some, you can say, some aspiration, they had some ideas, and they believed in Gandhian approach. They participated in non-cooperation movement, but the sudden withdrawal, sudden suspension of non-cooperation movement shattered the high hopes raised earlier, hope regarding Swaraj. Fine. And after this, what happened? Right? After this, we can mention the many young people, begin to question the very basic strategy, the very basic strategy of national leadership, right? And now, after a gap, revolutionary extremism became active, right? So they started questioning the strategy of the, right, you can say, Gandhian leadership. And after that, what was the result? Result was, as I said, frustration, and because of that frustration, revolutionary extremism, right, revolutionary extremism again, right, became active, became attractive. Fine. And two important trends of this revolutionary extremism developed. One trend was in Punjab, UP, and in second trend was Bengal. So two important trends developed. One trend in Punjab and Uttar Pradesh area, modern day Uttar Pradesh area, and the second trend was in Bengal. And Bhagat Singh represented this trend. Bhagat Singh represented this trend, and Surya Sen represented this Bengal trend. Fine. I hope you understand now what is the context of these two personality. Context is the situation or the frustration after suspension of non-cooperation movement, and this frustration gave rise to revolutionary extremism, and two important trends, right, what you call sometime northern trend and the eastern trend or Bengal trend emerged, and Bhagat Singh represented this northern trend and Surya Sen represented this Bengal trend. Fine. So, if you have understanding of this context, it is easy to understand Bhagat Singh and Surya Sen. Now, first we can discuss Bhagat Singh. Some important information regarding Bhagat Singh. We can mention that he was born in 1907. Bhagat Singh born in 1907 in Punjab, and he was influenced by, Bhagat Singh was influenced by Bhai Parmanand, Jai Chandra Vidyalankar, and right, his uncle Ajit Singh. So, there was influence of Bhai Parmanand, Jai Chandra Vidyalankar and Ajit Singh. We can mention that he was one of the most well-read political leaders, right? He was one of the most well-read political leaders. He appreciated the role of ideas in change, right? So, he was one of the most well-read political leaders, and at Lahore, he organized several study circles. He organized several study circles. So, he was no doubt about it that he was an, right, you can say, a brilliant student, an intellectual, a man of ideas. And in 1920s, in 1926, he was instrumental in foundation of what you call Punjab Naujawan Sabha. Fine. So, he started organizing student. And a very important organization was Lahore Students Union. Then he came under the influence of those socialist group, what you call HSRA, Hindustan Socialist Republic Association. So, HSRA, he joined, and in December 1928, right, Simon Commission agitation was going on. So, in December 1928, to avenge the Lathi charge on Lala Lajpat Rai, he shot dead Saunders, what you call Saunders, you can say murder case. He shot dead Saunders, right. So, Lahore kind of conspiracy and all, right, you can say development you have after that. Then in April 1929, on April 8th, 1929, he and Batukeshwar Dutt threw a bomb on, you can say, in Central Assembly, Indian traders, and he was sentenced to death. He was sentenced to death. And right, uh, and he was, right. So there was a conspiracy case again, and central assembly bomb case, and he was tried in these cases, and he was sentenced to death. He was sentenced to death. And Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru, Bhagat Singh, Sukhdev, and Rajguru were hanged in Lahore Central Jail on March 23, 1931. Lahore Central Jail on March 23, right, 23rd March 1931. Lots of controversy, lots of stories, motivating stories. Just I wanted to highlight some important development related to Bhagat Singh. Right. So he was associated with some student unions, some study circles, right, HSRA, fine. And then there was a Lahore conspiracy case, assembly case, sentenced to death, sacrificed his life. Fine. When you will analyze the role of Bhagat Singh, you will see that he actually broadened, right, the definition of independence. He came under the influence of Marxism, right. When you will see his ideas, you will see how he contributed in our freedom movement. For example, we can mention that he declared that the real revolutionary armies the real revolutionary armies are in the villages, and in the factories. Very important statement, right. So what he tried to convince us that the real revolutionary armies are in the villages and in the factories. So he talked about those farmers and workers. So right, even right, this statement will tell you his ideas. Right, he said that I am not a terrorist, right. I have acted like a terrorist, but I am not a terrorist. So he actually was a revolutionary, he was actually a socialist, and you can see the influence of Marxism on Bhagat Singh. Fine. So whenever you are analyzing Bhagat Singh, you must analyze Bhagat Singh in the context of his contribution, right. Contribution not only in the context of, you can say, arousing consciousness among youth, but organizing those revolutionary armies in villages, or you can say in the village and in the factories also. Fine. Then we can also mention, when you are analyzing Bhagat Singh, that he also saw, right, the importance of, you can say, freeing the people from the mental bondage, right, the importance of, saw the importance of, you can say, freeing the people, freeing the people, freeing the people from the mental bondage, from the mental bondage, from the mental bondage, right, of religion and superstition, superstition. I hope you are getting that. So, one dimension of Bhagat Singh is, right, his contribution towards nationalism. One dimension of Bhagat Singh is how he motivated youth. One dimension of Bhagat Singh is, right, how he talked about workers and peasant farmers. One dimension of Bhagat Singh is how he motivated students, organized students, how he defined, you can say, independence in broader terms. And then one more dimension of Bhagat Singh is, right, importance of freeing the people from the mental bondage of religion and superstition, right. And he wrote an article, Why I Am an Atheist. So, in the context of what you call now secularism also, right, we can never forget the contribution of Bhagat Singh. Fine. So, when you are analyzing Bhagat Singh, you are analyzing the role of Bhagat Singh, right, in the, you can say, in a broader, you can say, context. Fine. Now, overall, what was the contribution we will discuss, but now come to Surya Sen. Surya Sen. Surya Sen. Surya Sen is popularly called Master Da. Master Da. Master Da. He was popularly called Master Da. Right. So, he contributed in Bengal, in the eastern India. Right. Same, almost same period, but he, you can say, continued even in 1930s. So, he was also, right, you can say, a member, or you can say he also participated in non-cooperation movement. So, we can add that Surya Sen, right, actively participated in non-cooperation movement, and he and his group were closely associated with the Congress in Chittagong area, right, Chittagong area. And right, he was also a man of ideas like Bhagat Singh, and he used to say, he was fond of saying, very important statement of Surya Sen, he used to say, humanism is a special virtue, of a revolutionary. I hope you are getting that. We generally, right, the British colonial masters, they try to give us this picture that they are terrorists. But now we don't use, right, even this word for these heroes. Surya Sen and Bhagat Singh, they were not terrorists. They rejected this, right. They said we are revolutionary, right. They had ideas, they had ideology, they were guided by ideology. And right, Surya Sen even said that humanism is a special virtue of a revolutionary. He was fond of poetry, you know, Surya Sen, and right, he was a great admirer of Rabindranath Tagore and Qazi Nazrul Islam, right. So, you cannot reject them and ignore them as a terrorist, right, fine. So, they were men of ideas, they had certain ideas, they were very popular. So, what they did, this Surya Sen, he soon gathered around himself, right, a large band of revolutionary youth, large band of revolutionary youth, right, including Anant Singh, including Anant Singh, including Ganesh, including Loknath Ball, three important name, right, mentioned in our textbook, Anant Singh, Ganesh Ghosh and Loknath Ball, and they formed what you call IRA Republican Army or Chittagong Republican Army. Chittagong Republican. Ghosh, Ganesh Ghosh, including Loknath Ball, three important name, right, mentioned in our textbook, Anant Singh, Ganesh Ghosh and Loknath Ball, and they formed what you call IRA Republican Army or Chittagong Republican Army. Chittagong Republican Army, right, Chittagong Republican Army, right. So, if you will analyze his contribution, it is a fact that his venture was short-lived, of course, use of violence, and right, Suri Sen was finally arrested in February 1933 and he was hanged in January 1934. But his effort or his approach or his organizing ability was, right, super. A remarkable aspect of his, you can say, approach or this phase of revolutionary movement in Bengal was large scale participation of young women. So, most important feature of Suri Sen's approach or his, right, approach towards revolutionary extremism was participation of large, right, you can say, or large scale participation of young women. Young women, this is interesting. Large scale participation of young women, right. So, for example, you have Priti Lata Vadedar, Priti Lata, right, Priti Lata Vadedar, right. You have Kalpana Dutt, right. So, then you have Santi Ghosh, you have Suniti Chaudhary, and some of them they started firing, right, on British officials like Beena Das. These names, right, they all were the, you can say, the members of his group. Like I said, Priti Lata Vadedar, then I said Kalpana Dutt, then I said, you can say Santi Ghosh, Suniti Chaudhary, Beena Das, all these young girls, right, they were known for their heroism in, you can say, in Bengal. Then we should remember that this Chittagong cadre or this Republican Army cadre included many Muslims also. This is also important, right. Many Muslim like Sattar, like you can say Mir Ahmad, they all participated. So, these army or this group which they called army got massive support in the Muslim villages, right, around Chittagong in Bengal. So, they were known for their broad approach, participation of young women, participation of Muslims and their ideas for freedom. So, we can always appreciate their role. They used violent method, but you can never call them or ignore them as terrorists. Fine. So, what was their contribution? They had limitation, no doubt about it. Whenever you talk about revolutionaries, they had limitation. But always remember that they should be judged, right, by their courage, by their conviction. Always understand it, Bhagat Singh or Surya Sen, they should be judged by, you can say, by the courage of, you can say, or the conviction. They succeeded in creating a political storm, no doubt about it. They were very successful. They blazed a new trail. They blazed a new trail on the front of secularism. Right, I tried to give you this example. So, on the front of secularism also, because it was a, right, communal atmosphere began in 1930s and 1920s, but right, they tried to appreciate, right, this value of secularism.